Hey you guys, and welcome back to our channel. So this week we're going to talk a little bit more about motherhood, and if you're a mom out there who is trying to decide what's the best option for your family, whether you want to stay at home or whether you want to continue working, hopefully this video will help give you a little bit more insight in helping you to choose what you feel like is best for you and your family. So I have never been a working mom. I've always been a stay-at-home mom, but our daughter Naya is almost 2.5, and so some things that I considered when I was trying to decide which would be better for me was my career number one. So I used to be an elementary school teacher, and when it comes to teaching, for me, I have a harder time turning my brain off. So even when I'm not at work, my brain is always on. I would be laying in bed, like trying to relax before I go to sleep, and I'm thinking of like 20 million things that I need to do the next day. Or I could be, doing something out somewhere and I'm dreading thinking about some meeting I have at work with a parent or whatever. And so it was just a constant struggle of like learning how to turn off when I'm not at work. So that was something I considered with having a child. I didn't want to have this like constant struggle of I'm with my child at home, but yet like I have a list of stuff that I still need to get done, and trying to figure out how to balance the two. Now, not that I couldn't have done it, because I'm sure I could, but I just wanted to feel like I could completely turn my brain off and focus with my child. So that was a big determining factor for me. Something else was TJ's job. So he is an emergency medicine physician, and so for him, his schedule changes all the time. Sometimes he works overnight, sometimes he works days, sometimes he'll work from night into early morning, and so it's never the same. Some days he might work, like 2-3 days out of the week, or another week it could be 4 or 5 days. So you just never know. And I wanted to make sure that when we had kids, we always had one parent that could be there. And so, obviously that couldn't be him, and not because he didn't want to, but just because he has other responsibilities. So I wanted to make sure that I could be the person to be there for them whenever they had sporting events, or if they had an event at school. With me being a teacher, I couldn't just not go to my job to go to something with them. So I always wanted to make sure that I could be involved, so they always have somebody there. And the third factor for me deciding on staying home was looking at a financial aspect. So I stopped working once TJ became a resident physician. At that point, he was making a salary. So in medical school, you don't get paid for anything. But once you go to residency, you do start to get paid a part of your salary. And so if I were to have worked, basically my salary would have covered daycare. There may have been like, $200 left. Sure, that could have went towards some kind of bill or something, but for me, it just wasn't really worth going to work and then kind of dreading going to work, if that makes sense. So I just didn't really see a good, return on continuing to work throughout residency and once he was an attending. So I just decided that for me, it would be better that I just stayed home. So ultimately, if you're trying to decide whether you want to stay at home or whether you want to work, the first thing you have to know is that nobody can decide that for you. So even though you may talk it over with your spouse or your significant other, or you might talk it over with family and friends, ultimately you're gonna have to be the one that decides which one you feel like is best for you. So for example, if you do decide to stay at home, try to give yourself kind of like a grace period. So for me, what I did is I was going to see how the first year went, and if I felt like I was just bored or like needed that adult interaction, I had told TJ, and we talked about it, that if after that first year I just felt like I couldn't do it, that I would just go back to work. So if you're in the same position and you're considering staying at home or even working, try to give yourself a grace period, like take 6 months or a year, see how it goes. And if you feel like, you know what, I really feel like I should be doing the other, then switch and do whatever the other option is. But again, ultimately, you have to pick whichever way you feel like will work best for you. Now, sharing from the working side of being a mom that works outside of the home, I've never personally done that, but I have talked to other moms and friends who are moms and also work. And some of the things that they share is that, number one, they felt like they needed to work because that was just, they needed to have their own thing. They wanted to have something outside of just being somebody's mom or somebody's wife. They wanted to feel the fulfillment of working. And so for them, working makes them a better person. They get to go out into the world and make a contribution and feel like they're helping other people, or they feel like they're pouring into other people. And so that's something that working does for them. And then they feel as if when they come back home that they are now can be a better mom because they had that time to do stuff that makes them happy. And so it kind of, in a sense, fills them up to where they can come back home ready to take on motherhood and all that comes with that. So that's the biggest reason why a lot of women choose to work or continue to work after they have kids. Another reason might just be because they can't afford to stay home, and so they have to continue to work. Sometimes when talking with other moms, they have tried to stay at home with their child, and then they realize that like it was way much harder than they thought, or just way too much work, or they just didn't have the patience for it like they thought they would, and so they chose to go back to work, which is fine too. So that might be something, like I said, if you're trying to figure out which way to go and you have the flexibility to do either one, try out one and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work out that well, you can always change your mind and go back to the other. Sometimes something else people have mentioned is that they feel they've worked too hard to just kind of like let go or give it all away and just not continue in their career. And some people's careers, it's kind of, they're not as flexible as others. So like, for example, being a teacher is kind of flexible. You can pretty much move state to state and work anywhere as long as you get your licensing done. But for some jobs, say if you have a corporate job or just maybe a harder position to work in, it can be hard with having to move state to state for your spouse's medical journey, and it might not be worth taking a break and then trying to get back into it. So that's something to consider as well. But ultimately, I would say if you are a mom that's out there trying to decide which is going to work best for you, talk it over with your spouse. Maybe write a list of like what the pros would be for you, what the cons would be for both sides. Pray about it and just really think about which option will be the better option for you. Try it out and then see what happens. So far, I've been staying at home, I think, for 3 years now, I believe. 3 or 4, one of the two. And I would say something to think about is just the lack of adult interaction. So staying at home is hard. I mean, staying at home, working while being a mom, both are going to be hard. They each have their own challenges and they each have their own positives. But I will say staying at home, the one thing you will miss out on is the adult interaction. So you might get it a little bit with your spouse, but overall, like, you're mostly home by yourself with a child or baby who probably can't talk back to you. So that's one thing that's kind of hard, is you don't get that same, like, get to talk to other people all day while you're at your job. But overall, I would say still being a stay-at-home mom has been a great decision for me so far. I can't decide yet if I will ever go back into teaching. I won't say I will never do it, but as of now, I don't miss going back to work at all. So I've enjoyed being home with Naya, and it's just been good to be the one that gets to be home to see all of her milestones and kind of just be the one that I get to be the one to teach her stuff. Like, I get to be the one to teach her letters or her numbers or how to say her name. And that's just all things I know as a teacher myself I would have missed out on if I did continue to work. So thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our channel. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Marriage in Medicine. And we will see you in the next video.